In the original game, the sixth world was Pluto. Ironically, despite it being the smallest planet, Pluto was the largest and most diverse world in the game. Entropy had a different layout, but this was similarly huge and diverse. The board music was played a violin instrument, a melody that started out sounding mournful, but then it gets rather, I guess I could call it, distorted. It made me feel depressed and unnerved, not something I would not want to hear while trying to sleep. Strangely, none of these levels had the previous worlds were present here. Instead, there were 8 brand new icons. The bosses this time were Megalon, Batra, and Mega Godzilla. As usual, the first thing I did was go to the quiz level for another interrogation from Face. But when I got there, I noticed something different. Instead of the usual goofy GH1 Dora music, it was the password theme. The music change seemed to be international, because after the first 2 questions at the start, the quiz started to take more of a darker tone. Do you like ice cream? Answer, yes. Do you like clowns? Answer, yes. Is time slipping through your fingers? Answer, yes. Do you have any regrets? Answer, yes. Do some people deserve to die? Answer, no. Is it safe to go out at night? Answer, yes. Do you find it hard to sleep at night? Answer, yes. Have you ever killed anyone? Answer, no. Do you want to kill anyone? Answer, no. Are you actually accomplishing anything? Answer, no. Does life have any real meaning? Answer, no. Do you like Mothra? Answer, no. I knew the last one was going to be a gameplay related instead of a question, but I had no idea what the results of it would be. I answered honestly because, like I said before, I never liked Mothra. Nobody liked playing as Mothra in this game, and there was a good reason for that. Every other time Mothra gets hit, she gets slammed back into the left corner of the screen, and sucks at fighting because her attacks are so weak. Her only benefit Mothra had was being able to fly over obstacles in some levels. So I answered no, and the face immediately replied back to me, not only with the manacle expression, but with the text, "Too bad." I was taken aback to the map screen, and I was so shocked to see that Godzilla and Anguis have disappeared, like from the board, leaving only Mothra. Face had just messed me over. Needless to say, I was pissed. But there wasn't anything I could do, and I'm willing to bet that if I had said yes, I would have been stuck with Mothra anyway. Face given, and the face taken away. I took a deep breath and already began to explore. There were 2 paths I could take through the board. I decided to take the lower one. This turned out to be a good choice for reasons I'll get to momentarily. The first world ahead of me was the forest, so I started there. Almost immediately, I got an eerie feeling, like if there was something about this level that just seemed off to me, even more than the previous ones. Perhaps it was a pitch black background. I've always been afraid of being in the forest alone at night. Something about all those trees, it made me feel surrounded and invulnerable. And at the fact that I was stuck as Mothra didn't help. Playing the game's previous worlds as Godzilla gave me a feeling of bravery, being in control of the King of Monsters. I'd been able to handle just about anything in my way. But it's not just like that with Mothra. Feeling of no strength, no security. Now I'm just weak, easily overwhelmed bug, traversing into the unknown. Back to the level, the music had new instruments, sounding like woodwinds, followed by a slow, rhythmic drums and chiming bells. gave me the feeling that I was intruding into some dangerous place I had already should not be. After a while, I encountered the first enemies off the stage, or at least I assumed they were enemies. They were strange, long-legged deer-like creatures. Instead of attacking, they were just idly walking around. I went to approach to them, and they all ran away. I thought about shooting one down with my I-beam to see what would happen, but it seemed wrong. These creatures were harmless, so I passed over them and continued through the level. About halfway through, I encountered a groups like deer-like animals, and also two new creatures. A sloth-like creature with a climbing tree, and a hairy raptor Yuki beasts were preying on the deer. I was very surreal watching these creatures interact. I didn't feel like I was playing a video game, but rather that I was traveling through a forest in some other dimension. The creatures ignored me for the most part, and although the raptors did attack me when I got too close, or if I attacked them first, now I shot one of them to help one of the deer creatures escape. I got clawed at, but confrontation was easily avoided by flying up to the top of the screen. After that, to choose who I wanted to play the levels with the hourglass on this TV screen, I picked up the letter. That was all I got and what I expected. When I pressed the button on the start level on the screen, like it normally would, the screen with an animation popped up, and there were also music in the background, which was Goofy the GH1D0RA music that used to be playing the quiz levels. I was somewhat unsettled by this because it was so strange. I have found it a bit spooky because I had a t-shirt that looked just like that as a kid. After starting the animation, you could go back to the hand board and pressing any button. After that, I had no idea what to expect for the icons. I went to try the hourglass icon next. I was somewhat relieved when an actual level came up. It was certainly an unorthodox looking level, all brown with the time measuring instruments floating in the air with gigantic grandfather clocks in the background. The music was the same as the board screen, and very early in the level, I encountered something else I didn't expect to see. Original enemies from the game. And not just that, it seemed to be like the whole feed of them. The yellow tanks, which were normally immobile, that could now move. I took some damage, but it was nothing that I can't handle. But the most interesting thing about this level was how colored the hourglass items. There were 3 of these. A blue hourglass made time slow down and filled up the level of enemies from the past. A red hourglass that made time speed up and find the level of enemies from the future. A green hourglass was set to time to normal speed and filled the game with the original game enemies. I've encountered the blue hourglass first, as stated. The game started to slow down, and I saw the enemies from the past, which there were 5 different prehistoric animals. I don't know much about the prehistory, but I believe they were all enemies from the represent real animals. The level went into another segment, and I encountered the green hourglass, and then I fought the original enemies again. But this time there were 5 types, so I didn't have any screenshots. But the last segment I encountered had the red hourglass, and the enemies must have been taken from the future. And now whether or not the game was showing me 8-bit renditions of the creature, of what it actually exists in 1,000 years into the Earth's future, I have no idea. But the thought of it in mind, I found this particular segment to be very eerie, and like it was more tense because everything moved faster. One of the future enemies born striking a resemblance to something I saw in the book once called the Troodon Man. Another one looked like some sort of organic spaceship. There was only one of the 5th type of future creature when it appeared, and all the others ran for their lives, leaving me alone to battle it. I could fly, but the sprite actually didn't move. Its single attack was firing a lightning bolt from its face. Even so, supposedly powerful, can be considered as a mini-boss. After defeating it, it left a health power-up that restored my health and energy I had lost fighting it. Which was convenient, seemed that I would need all the help I could to beat this world with Mothra alone. After that previous stage, I called Time Warp, the next stage appeared to be a toxic waste dump. And as you could see, the picture looked very grungy and histopal. The music was short, looping with Amblet Symphonizer song. Listening to it made me feel that I had sniffed some toxic fumes myself. And it was messing with my head the whole time, even when I felt like I was choking while playing this level. The enemies all seemed to be mutated in some degree. In some above the screenshot, you could see green mummies with bird skulls, and they were jumping out into spit projectiles. There was also a brownish cow skeleton monster with spider legs. Halfway through the level, I saw even one of the deer thing from the forest. It was alone, and when I saw it, it was drinking toxic waste out of the barrel like an anteater, like a tongue. As I was moving over to try to make it stop, when its flock of skull birds came out of nowhere and started attacking. The deer was so scared by this, and I ended up running off into the ground into the toxic waste. I felt bad for it, but one of the birds bit me. I regained some health quickly from killing all of them. They were rather weak. I pressed onwards, and all the levels in Trophy. This was probably the most normal, that there was little deviance from the move forward Smash Things formula in the original game. I encountered some creatures throughout the level, like the tentacle blobs, some kind of deforming thing with human-like flesh. I didn't feel like provoking them into a fight, so I kept flying near the top of the screen, and I still had to deal with the occasional flock of birds every now and then. At the end of the level was a large bluish-greenish lake where I encountered another mini-boss. Some of the kind of monsters with a long neck and a whale skull. It attacks with a mouth projectile, and by charging into you, it could almost go underneath the water and rapidly emerge from a different place. It was harder to beat it than the boss like from Time Warp, and it did have a lot of health because it must have been taking me 3 minutes to defeat it. It let out a really loud noise when it died, and sank back into the water as I left the screen. Back on the board, I went to the nearest level icon I hadn't seen yet, which was a white tree, and as I guessed it, the level was a winter-themed recolor of the forest stage. But unlike the regular forest, I didn't feel unnerved starting this one. I think the music had a lot to do with it. As it was gentle, calm song, it almost sounded like romantic. Quite distress relieving, and the forest itself looked so much obnoxious, covered in snow. As I traveled through the first segment, enjoying the atmosphere for 4 minutes, when suddenly I realized something. I haven't seen a single creature since started out the level. Where are all the animals? Soon after, I left the screen, and the next segment started. In the second segment, I was still in the winter forest, but now the music was gone. I was starting to feel suspicious when I reminded myself that there was enough other empty levels in the game, and this was likely one of those. But then I heard something familiar. It was like 12-second looping music from Unforgiving Cold starting up. I could feel my heart sink as I came across this horrible sight. It was a whole group of dead deer creatures covered in snow. Judging from the blackish blue tone of their skin, they must have all froze to death. On closer inspection, some of them were missing body parts. Now I was frightened, but I still had to keep going. Before exiting the level, I nearly was really hoping to see something resembling the previous forest animals in a living state. And sure enough, I did. It was a creature much like the beaked sloth, except this thing was white fur and was more of a beaked gorilla. It was standing very slowly when I saw it, but I was happy at least to see something like this alive. However, it didn't stay away for too long. A pack of raptors, who must have sensed that something else was alive, came up rushing in from the right side of the screen, and must have beaked the gorilla couldn't stand a chance. One of the raptors immediately lunged and tore open its back legs. These winter raptors acted different from their temperated relatives, while the other raptors only attacked while hunting prey or provoked. The winter raptors seemed to have all gone insane. They all attacked anything in sight. One was running back and forth at nothing. Even the noises they have made sounded different, more high-pitched in a range. As I left the segment, I even saw two raptors fighting to the death. They were both covered in injuries, and one of the raptors had been blinded in the eye. I took a screenshot, and I didn't stay to see who won the fight. I only had to get through one more segment before I could go back to the board screen. But this segment, I was no longer in the winter forest, but instead a very empty, grassy plain with the bright gray moon in the sky. The pleasant music of Winter Forest Part 1 had returned. And immediately I started to feel dread. This was going to sound crazy, but it's absolute truth. The game made its way from one level of my memories. A long stretch after of nothing, I reached a lake, and when the moon moved down from the sky, it began to hatch like an egg when it did. Curled up humanoid figure fell into the lake as the moon halves quickly and disintegrate. I heard a loud splash when it hit the water, and then a moment of silence. The screen began to shake, and the new creature emerged from the water. And thus it introduced to the number I was called the Moon Beast. And it was the only screenshot I took, as I was focusing all my concentration on winning the fight. And it was the most difficult fight yet. Stronger than the previous boss, this creature would have been aired to take down with Godzilla, and with Mothra, it seemed nearly impossible. I suppose I could consider myself fortunate that the beast lacked any attacks like Gilligan saw, because if I had, it would have never won like this. I barely had 3 life bars of health when I finally killed this abomination. But what happened afterward is hardly what I could call a reward. I've been trying to keep my promise and suppress this memory for years, but it seems as if I have to get off my chest. It is a very painful memory for me, but the game already knows about it, and I think you should too. I'll just tell you the most important parts, because I don't like bringing this experience up back into my head unless I have to. Back when I was in middle school, I had a girlfriend named Melissa. She suffered from some kind of mental disorder that caused her to go into episodes. When she was in an episode, she would stand or sit perfectly straight and still. Her face would instantly lose any expressions that she had before. She would speak very clearly without any hint of emotion. When it was over, she would start trembling and sometimes bury her face in her hands and remain silent for several minutes. I can't convey the feeling of giving my words, and I wouldn't try. You had to see this in person to understand. But despite this, she was a very kind person, and I cared about her dearly. We liked to hang out in the field at night and looked at the stars. But one night she didn't say anything to me at all. She just stared directly at the moon, trembling. I tried to talk to her, but she suddenly sprung up and ran into a traffic. I tried to stop her, but it was too late. She got hit by a truck and was killed that night. I took her right into the eyes of the wheel that went over her neck. That sight was always haunted me. I know that the game knows about this because after I defeated the Moon Beast, this happened. Melissa, end your life.